Okay, so it looks like the Russia stuff is back.
Well, you'd be wrong, because it's back.
Breaking news out of Washington this morning. Sources now telling us exclusively that the Biden administration is set to accuse publicly Russia of extensive and prolonged interference in the 2024 election.
The Biden administration taking a series of actions to target what they allege are attempts by Russian-backed actors to manipulate public opinion here in the U.S. ahead of the presidential election.
They're doing it again, and they're using the same guys they always use.
This is being described by our sources as a whole-of-government action designed to target Russian propaganda and disinformation aimed at interfering in the 2024 election. It is said to include sanctions by the Treasury Department, law enforcement action by the Justice Department.
That guy there was Ken Dilanian, who, if he's not a CIA agent, he's a CIA puppet. Every deep state hoax, Agent Dilanian's got the scoop. Sources told him there was Russia collusion in 2016, the laptop was fake, and COVID definitely didn't leak from the lab.
Never mind the fact that Vladimir Putin literally earlier this year practically endorsed Biden in an interview that he did that was captured by The Guardian.
Байден или Трамп?
Байден. Он человек более опытный, он прогнозируемый, он политик старой формации. Но мы будем работать с любым лидером США, которому окажет доверие американский народ. Послушайте, я когда встречался с Байденом в Швейцарии, это было, правда, несколько лет назад, 3 года там, ну, и тогда уже говорили о том, что он недееспособный. Ничего подобного я не увидел. Ну да, он подглядывал свою бумажку, я, честно говоря, подглядывал свою. Ничего такого.
By the way, is very much a left-leaning outlet. But of course, here we are dealing with this. Now, guys, I want you to know something really quick. This is going to be the first of 2 videos. Now, the reason why I'm saying first of 2 videos is because this video right here was actually supposed to be a much, much larger video. But I did tell you guys I was going to try to shorten the videos and make them less than 20 minutes, even though the video that I had planned probably would have been about 40 minutes because it would have provided a lot more context, or it would have actually wrapped this video up into that one there. So that way I can give you guys a better explanation why I guess I'm just not that talented, but still at the same time, I got to split the text up into 2. The reason why is because if you haven't already heard, the Department of Justice, the DOJ, just indicted, now that we got much, much further clarification on it, they indicted 2 people who failed to register as foreign agents who worked for RT, who apparently gave money to Lauren Chen, and of course the head of Tenet Media, who she is, to possibly disseminate certain amounts of propaganda. And of course, there are conservatives on Twitter, especially personalized people with platforms, who are jumping all over this and jumping all over her. However, upon further review, it might be a good idea to actually break this down a little bit further, especially given the fact that the Department of Justice has confirmed that everybody outside of Lauren Chen, that right there including Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, also Taylor Hanson, Lauren Southern, and Dave Rubin, were apparently victims of the situation. However, I'll be giving you guys much more clarification on that one in the follow-up video. Now, to this story here. So why in the world are we bringing back the Russia narrative? Well, given the fact that there have been a lot of people, including Mark Halperin, a Democrat pollster, given the fact that we've had a lot of polls out there that show Harris up, there's also a lot of people who are saying they don't buy the polls. By the way, these are not Republican pollsters who are saying this, outside of Richard Barris, who, by the way, is probably the best pollster in the business, and Mark Thompson over there at Mark Mitchell, my bad. Mark Mitchell at Rasmussen Reports, who does daily tracking polls. Yeah, they kind of oversample Republicans from time to time, but yet somehow their results always end up being very, very accurate, or at least they're accurate to what happened on election day. Still, at the same time, though, a lot of people are looking at this and they're saying she's nowhere near as ahead as they think she is. Not to mention the fact the only poll that she got that had a boost in it was the Fairleigh Dickinson poll, which she was up by 7. And of course, that boost from the DNC, come to find out it was actually pushed if you read the article. And then to go on top of that, every other poll since then has had really no boost at all. So that tends to indicate that there's no momentum behind her and that she's slowly but surely being overtaken by the orange guy. So why bring back the Russia thing? Well, the thing about polls is this here, and I don't want to make this too much about polls, is that they typically tend to have an impact on the vote itself, whether you're going to vote or not. You see a lot of people out there want to get politically involved, but yet they don't if they think a certain candidate's going to lose. This has never been a problem with the Trump side, because the Trump side has always had good-sized turnout when you have pure Trump voters. And of course, the Democratic Party now sees that the Trump base is much, much larger than they originally thought that it was. And they're starting to realize that we may want to shift the narrative because something bad could in fact happen. And by bad, I mean bad for the media, bad for the Democrats, which of course is good for us because then they would be out of office. However, it does not surprise me that Russia has come back, as you guys obviously saw at the very beginning. That right there was Jesse Waters, roughly 53 seconds. And of course, I played for you guys the clip of Vladimir Putin at The Guardian basically saying, look, you know, on Biden, even though obviously Biden is not the nominee, it is Kamala Harris. However, he has also came out and said that he prefers Kamala Harris to Donald Trump. We'll get to that here in a second. Of course, the left, the liberals, they will not buy this. They'll say that they want Trump to be in office, but still, though, you will see indications in the follow-up video, this one right here, that that's probably not accurate at all, that they more than likely do want Kamala Harris. Not to mention the fact there's actually historical precedent, which I'll probably touch on at the very end of this video. So, why bring it back? Well, they're bringing it back because they need to set a narrative. You see, our mainstream media, they work in tandem with the Democratic Party. Some have even argued that the Democratic Party is actually really and truly just an arm of the mainstream media. I kind of believe that theory. It's one of the few things that I fully agree with Bill O'Reilly on. The thing is this right here, the media controls the narrative, they shape the news, they shape how people think, and of course, when they lose the power to do so, they find themselves, looking for other things to help manipulate the masses. After a while, the masses that they have just live in the echo chamber and believe everything that the mainstream media says. Of course, that echo chamber is starting to get smaller and smaller and smaller if you pay attention to the voter registration numbers, but still at the same time, though, they obviously need a certain narrative to pitch in case Kamala Harris loses. But before we go into all that, let's go ahead and get to the news. So some of this right here came from Jesse Waters, of course, roughly 8 minutes and 53 seconds. Now, some of you are probably going to say that right there is not credible. He's Fox News. Well, let me go ahead and tell you something really quick about this situation. Oftentimes, when you're looking for the information, you're looking for the clips or whatnot, oftentimes you go to X or Twitter first. And normally if you just type in something, they'll give you the clips. And normally it's another commentator reacting the same exact way that I'm reacting, giving some form of monologue, except I'm providing everything that the commentator misses and providing additional context because I can obviously get away with doing this little segment in a little bit longer amounts of time. I can obviously get away with that because I'm a YouTuber, I'm on social media. Just figured I'd go ahead and point that out before we go any further, but let's go ahead and get back to what you guys were saying.
Ken Dilanian was busted sending the CIA drafts of stories before he published them. One draft he sent to the CIA had the subject line, "Does this look better?" The LA Times had to disown Dilanian after he was outed as a CIA collaborator. The United States government has interfered in nearly every country's elections. The CIA used to buy off entire political parties in Italy and Japan, literally handing out suitcases of cash to politicians, and has staged violent coups in Iran, Guatemala, Vietnam, Indonesia, countless countries, and pumped out American propaganda throughout Europe and Asia for decades. And we're now in an all-hands-on-deck situation because of a few Russian websites.
A few Russian websites, a few bots led to this montage.
Election attacked our democracy.
I think he's guilty because he knows.
What did he do?
Well, he's the one who can answer that. I think.
No,
what is he?
You said he's guilty. What's he guilty of?
Well, I think he feels that there is something that's going to come out about Russia. Remember?
Why are other Americans basically believing Putin? Why did Trump believe Putin more than our 11 intelligence agencies?
I don't know. Do you have a working theory?
I do have a working theory.
Well, the role of the government, in his view, is to advance his political fortunes and destroy his political enemies. So what would a second term look like? It would look a lot like Vladimir Putin in Russia. It would look a lot like Viktor Orban in Hungary. Illiberal democracy. Meaning
2016, the Russians intervened heavily in our election.
That was only about 50 some odd seconds. You see, guys, if I remember correctly, it actually started with Facebook. They had all kinds of bots, all kinds of websites that people were clicking onto. Very, very susceptible for Trump voters to actually fall for that. But I highly doubt that crowd sizes like this right here indicate that Russia created that. I'm pretty sure that was done by something not named Russia, but still at the same time, though, these people obviously need something to blame when the crap hits the fan and when they lose. However, I got to tell you right now, I have been very, very much in the camp that even though there are people out there who believe that Kamala Harris may be getting sacrificed because I know she can't win, I personally don't buy that theory fully. I still believe at some point in time they're going to make her president before the election to give her another boost to try to give off the aura that she cannot be defeated or she cannot be beaten, even though, as you guys can obviously see, the Trump base will obviously still climb over broken glass to vote for Trump. So therefore, this right here kind of goes back to the old adage that turnout wins elections, not polls, but polls can in fact shape public opinion. The difference is that the Trump base obviously loves Trump, and obviously people like myself who are going to go out there and go vote regardless are going to want to vote against the Democrat because we live in states where our governor's race is on the line and we have other races down ballot that we need to vote. So obviously we're going to vote for Trump in the process. The point is this right here. These people need somebody to blame in case something does in fact go wrong. So who the hell are you going to blame? You're going to blame Russia. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to play this next part, commentate for a second, and then play the CBS clip because the CBS clip I think is way more... how do I say, a little bit more informative as to the confusion that's out there. But let's play this next one.
What exactly is the Biden-Harris administration accusing Russia of? The machine tells the Times the Kremlin's propaganda apparatus has thrown itself behind Mr. Trump's candidacy, creating online news outlets and fake videos to denigrate President Biden and, more recently, Ms. Harris. If you're wondering what this Russia disinformation looks like, here it is. If you see the following narratives on the internet, it could be Russian interference. Are you ready? Record inflation, unaffordable prices for food and essential goods, risk of job losses for white Americans, privileges for people of color, threat of crime coming from people of color and immigrants, overspending on foreign policy. The United States government wants us to believe that the Russians are using Republican talking points to interfere with the election. And if we see things online about DEI or migrant crime or...
So basically everything that's going on in the United States, record high inflation, all that type of stuff there that you guys heard. So basically the stuff that we're all dealing with on a daily basis is now officially, potentially a narrative pushed by Russia. Fascinating. It's fascinating to me how they do this because everybody in the world, or at least everybody here in the United States, and it's a phenomenon across the world, everybody has some trust issues when it comes to the mainstream media, especially given the fact that people are living in a different reality than the media. Of course, like I said, though, I did say that they did need somebody to blame, and that right there, of course, being Russia, because obviously their voter base, the most rabid portions of the voter base, the never Trump base, they typically tend to believe everything that the media says. Of course, even though some of these people obviously do not and just throw the lie and just keep pitching it and keep playing the lie over and over and over again, because let's be honest, after a while, lies do in fact become truth to some people, which of course does in fact bring me to the CBS clip that I got a hold of, because the CBS clip actually has Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, talking on this very, very matter. And of course, there is something at the very, very end that I do think is very, very important that the lady does in fact say that I do want to harp on momentarily.
Talking, I guess, was it on Russian TV? I mean, is this real?
I don't know if he's for real, Anne-Marie, because I don't know what's going on inside Vladimir Putin's head. But look, viewed from one perspective, maybe it's not that surprising. Back in February, Putin said that in terms of Russia's interests, President Biden was actually preferable to former President Trump because he was more predictable and old school. Then in his comments today, Putin said, quote, Trump has imposed as many sanctions on Russia as any president has ever imposed before. And if Harris is doing well, perhaps she'll refrain from such actions. So, maybe President Putin is for real. And then yesterday, the Justice Department filed charges against 2 employees of a Russian state-controlled broadcaster over an alleged $10 million scheme to produce content for U.S. audiences with hidden Russian government messaging. The Attorney General said yesterday that Russia's preferences in this election have not changed from the preceding election. Disinformation and propaganda experts who I've spoken to have said that the overarching goal of Russian disinformation is not really about one candidate in one election. Instead, it's about undermining the trust of American people in democracy, in their country's institutions.
So you hear that Putin wants Harris. Of course, he wants Harris because obviously Putin would like to have a better chance of having his way when it comes to Ukraine, which of course we are, for the most part, responsible for too, because obviously we've been going out of our way to poke the bear there. Don't get me started on that, even though I will to give you guys some history at the very end. You obviously heard the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, a person that, quite frankly, I do not take serious. I mean, his own voice, the way it just kind of shakes and rattles, just tells you he's not a man to be taken serious under any circumstances. Very, very much a weakling. But, of course, you hear this part at the end on how it is that they want to sow disinformation to try to get people not to trust the media or the government. But there was also another bit there that I actually cut off kind of quick, because she actually said that the idea was to try to get people not to trust one another. That process has been going on for a very long time, and I would, in fact, point you towards the late, great Yuri Bezmenov for that, because he talked about that a lot in his lectures. I've read his book, and, of course, I wanted to do a video on that. However, that right there may wait for some time in the future. It just depends on exactly what I can do in the next year or so, so we're not going to touch that now. The fact of the matter is this right here. The Russia stuff is going to be used over and over again. However, the real true enemy of the United States is actually China, and they're going to neglect the fact that China also meddles in U.S. elections as well. Jesse Waters, of course, the end of his monologue, he pretty much says the exact same thing, which I'm going to play for the I'm going to play for you guys the very end, or the last bit that I got, that I'm going to come back and give you guys the historical precedent and what he means by what he's actually saying. So let's go ahead and roll this.
What exactly is the Biden-Harris administration accusing Russia of? The machine tells the Times the Kremlin's propaganda apparatus has thrown itself behind Mr. Trump's candidacy, creating online news outlets and fake videos to denigrate President Biden and, more recently, Ms. Harris. If you're wondering what this Russia disinformation looks like, here it is. If you see the following narratives on the internet, it could be Russian interference. Are you ready? Record inflation, unaffordable prices for food and essential goods, risk of job losses for white Americans, privileges for people of color, threat of crime coming from people of color and immigrants, overspending on foreign policy. The United States government wants us to believe that the Russians are using Republican talking points to interfere with the election. And if we see things online about DEI or migrant crime...
I want to address the very first thing that Jesse said there. Yes, it's true. Their own special counsel basically debunked the Russia hoax last time. The reporters are looking at this, and they're basically rolling their eyes, and they're like, oh, God, here we go again. Look, the truth be told is this right here. When the Democrats lose this election cycle, they're going to blame anybody and everybody that they can. So, obviously, Russia is going to be the first person that they're going to go after. However, I did tell you guys that I was going to provide some historical context on this, but before I do that, let me just go ahead and kind of say this. We've been meddling in elections for years. Russia meddles in our elections. China meddles in our elections. Everybody meddles in everybody's elections. It's called a power game. It's to be expected. However, there is something that, quite frankly, we should have gotten better at a long time ago, and that was cybersecurity. I don't know if we've really and truly improved in that field, but given the fact that you've got China who says that they would prefer to have the Democrat win, and Russia who says they would prefer the Republican win, even though obviously Russia is preferring the Democrat to win, it seems to me that obviously there's a reason for it. And of course, that is what we're going to be talking about at this moment. Back in 2016, there were a lot of people that I knew personally that were posting memes on Facebook about Trump with Putin because they kept getting the narrative that Russia was funding his campaign. It was absolutely absurd, especially if you're somebody who actually understands U.S. history. Now, guys, I'm not a historian, but I am going to give you guys a bit of a quick history lesson on this topic. I may do military history on the second channel that I'm looking to create because there is going to be a history channel where I'm going to talk about crimes and stuff, but it may evolve into history. But bear with me with this right here as I talk about this. The Potsdam Conference during World War II was a conference in which, let's just go ahead and say that Winston Churchill, who, by the way, has come up in recent conversation here because Tucker Carlson interviewed a Nazi sympathizer the other day. I'll probably have a video out on that on Sunday. It's going to be a while. I need to collect some more data before I get to posting on this. I'm going to try to get a video out every day this week. But basically, the conversation was on how we're going to divide Europe after World War II. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the specifics of it. I'm not a historian. If you are a historian, if you think I got something wrong, please comment in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you guys got to say. But still, at the same time, though, when World War II ended, and bear in mind, FDR died in April of 1945. He died a month before Germany surrendered. George S. Patton thought it would be a good idea if the United States did not allow Russia to take anything beyond a certain point. And I believe that that point was Prague. But then again, at the same time, seeing how Prague is in Czechoslovakia, I don't think he wanted them in Poland either. I have always been of the mindset that the United States could have avoided a lot of problems if we had just simply, sometime when World War II ended, if we had just simply attacked the Russians who were currently in Berlin at the time. Actually, the perfect excuse would have been the Berlin airlift that occurred the following year. We would have been able to push them back through Poland. Now, granted, Russia would have been able to counterattack us, and they would have been able to push us back across Poland. But, of course, we had much, much more nuclear capability and a much, much larger air force. And our country was actually much, much better. It was actually in much, much better condition to defend itself and fight a war post-World War II than what the Russians were. Russians lost a lot of men during World War II. The manpower just wasn't there. Don't be fooled by the whole myth of Russia won World War II. They really, truly did not. So we had the ability to kick them back into Russia. Now, obviously, invading Russia is a bad idea. Napoleon tried it, didn't work out for him. The Swedes even tried it at one point in time, didn't work out for them. And, of course, we all know about Adolf Hitler failing during Operation Barbarossa. But still, though, the point is this right here. We could have avoided a lot of problems if we had just simply run a backbone. But, of course, FDR had kind of had it in place, and Truman went through with it, that we would kind of falter to the Russians and that we would give them Eastern Europe. Let's fast forward to 1960, 1961. Actually, 1959. Richard Nixon has a debate with Khrushchev, defeats him. Then Kennedy gets in office. He wins. Don't get me started on that. And then while that's going on, next thing you know, Kennedy's kind of getting bullied by the Russians. They go into East Berlin. They eventually put nuclear missiles 90 miles off the coast of Cuba. And, of course, we play coward during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Don't think we actually won the Cuban Missile Crisis. We actually did not come out with a win there. It was a draw at best. I don't ever want to hear anybody talk about the Democrats and how they're so hawkish on Russia. The Democrats have never been hawkish on Russia. As a matter of fact, they fought Nixon tooth and nail when it comes to detente. They fought not only Nixon, but they fought the hell out of Ronald Reagan when Ronald Reagan wanted to put an end to the Soviet Union, calling it the axis of evil back in the 1980s, outspending them militarily to bankrupt that nation. They fought him tooth and nail on that. The Democratic Party has never been good on the topic of Russia. So anytime you hear somebody talk about the Democrats and how it is that they're the true defenders against Russia, I want you to know something right now. The Democratic Party has always been terrible on the topic of Russia, and they've sold out on Russia on multiple occasions. Don't even get me started. But just remember, there's historical precedent to laugh in their faces anytime they bring up that Trump or the Republicans are bought by Russia. Just simply saying. With that right there being said, though, the conclusion of this entire situation is that obviously they're narrative setting. They're narrative setting because they need someone to blame after the election lost this cycle. But you guys say what you think in the comment section. Make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sign off in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.